investment, you can see that in some homes, for example, 52 homes currently require over £10,000 worth of investment to achieve C, and that's even with a gas boiler. If we are not using gas boilers, then that takes that number of homes that require that in excess of £10,000 investment up to 253 homes. We go to the next slide. This is information, obviously, that will be available. Again, often people are interested in who should they contact. So it's the key contact. So you've got Paul and myself and our colleague Russell, who is responsible for new homes. And you've also got contact details there from Luke Diamond. Luke is the regional manager who covers this area, and Joe Bashford, who is the area manager who covers this area. Maybe at that point, I'll hand it over to any questions or discussion people would like to have.
Thank you very much for that. That was really in-depth, both of you. I've got
oh, yes.
I've got a whole list of questions, but the first person I'm going to go to is Councillor Barry Ratcliffe, who is our portfolio holder for housing.
I can send the slides out after, if that would.
Yes, thank you, Paul and Suzanne, for the presentation, from which it is clear that Live West have a huge ambition and track record for delivery. West Devon Borough Council have declared a housing crisis, and we have a shared vision of greater affordability for housing supply to sustain our communities. With reference to your point on collaboration with borough councils, what role would you like to see West Devon undertake to ensure success? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm going to start. I think you had some conversation. Oh, sorry, of course.
Yeah, so I'll make a start. Thank you, Barry, for that. I think the reality is many local authorities now are starting to see affordable housing and housing delivery as a priority. In probably a way 12 to 18 months ago, they weren't. And I think not only is it great to see that it's one of your strategic priorities, but obviously you're recognising the challenges around affordability and lack of supply, and therefore have declared a housing crisis. There are a number of barriers, and I wonder whether we could go to the slide. It's slide 10, which is, and I'll talk through it as we're going through. But if you could go back into the slide deck, there was one: increasing new housing supply. I said earlier on, the planning system today isn't fit for purpose. I think anyone that assumes that having a 5-year supply will deliver 100% of the homes needed in 5 years, when we all know that's never happened. I've been in housing development for 34 years, and I've never seen that happen in any year. And I think really begs the question that we really need to be looking long term, beyond 5 years, and starting to recognise that if we're going to deal with the housing crisis, it's a simple equation around supply and demand. And demand continues at pace through a range of reasons. The South West population is getting larger. We're seeing people migrating post-COVID into this beautiful part of the world. Why? Because people can now work digitally, and that will continue. So the challenge really is, how do we identify more opportunities? And lots of land is held with developers, either through options or strategic land, and doesn't necessarily come to market when we want it. So I think really this is about probably looking over the next 5 to 15, 20 years and recognising that the housing crisis that you've declared today is probably a generational issue that needs to be resolved. And it fundamentally is going to require a step change in volume of delivery over and above what your previous planning processes have done. So I think that's first and foremost. I think then it's around thinking about how do we collaborate. From Live West's perspective, we have an ambition, as you'll see from one of the earlier slides. This slide at the top, you can see we're planning to invest to build 6,000 homes. To give you a sense of what that investment is going to equate to, it's about £1.6 billion. We have the financial resources to do that, and we'll continue to do that. But of course, we can't spend that money if there aren't the opportunities. So it does come back to land and opportunities. So I think about land supply, around planning, around thinking long term, around land allocation, and starting to be creative around even considering whether we should collaborate on maybe even jointly procuring land longer term, and starting to work together to promote land through planning processes. I know it may be alien to some local authorities, but a number, and I could give Cornwall as an example, we've had a number of successful initiatives with Cornwall where we have secured land with them and another developer to see multiple sites come through development, primarily to deal with more affordable housing and recognising that the council did have land available and were prepared to hypothecate that land in order to see more affordable housing be delivered. So it's a range of issues, but I think first and foremost it comes back to political will and land allocation and using the planning system to accelerate the volume of delivery.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sellis, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do recall the previous meeting with Live West, and I note that at Greenlands you have put your money where you promised in soundproofing and making some of the areas warmer. So I'm watching that with interest, and I work very closely with Alison Knight, who's absolutely wonderful, is really proactive and has been able to do a significant amount for residents. So thank you very much for that. Regarding land supply, given that it is key to the housing demand, is Live West building multi-storey accommodation given the pressures of volume of delivery?
The answer is yes, but we are invariably sensitive to the environment. So in urban areas, Bristol's a good example. We have a number of quite high density urban developments there. Hartcliffe campus is a good example where there are flats, multiple stories. I have to say we are, although we work in a number of urban centres from Bristol down to Truro, the vast majority of what we build are in suburban, provincial town and rural areas, and therefore it's important that we build the type of homes that blend with the vernacular of those areas. So the vast majority of what we build tends to be 1, 2 and 3 bedroom homes. We will build flats. They tend to be 1 bedroom flats.
Yeah, I was just going to say we obviously do build flats. We tend to be 1 bedroom flats. We do as well build 2 and 3 bedroom flats, but they tend to definitely be in more urban areas. And we are, as well as being sensitive to the areas, we're sensitive to the demands and needs of the customer base, and the recognition that actually, if you are a young family, actually getting up 2 or 3 flights of stairs with a buggy isn't the most easy thing to do. So we recognise that as well. So our preference is where we can, and where it's financially viable, we would look to build houses, but we do build flats as well.
I think it would also be fair to say that following the appalling disaster at Grenfell Towers, the whole industry has, and the affordable housing sector has looked long and hard around some of the challenges associated not just with materials but also high-rise properties as well. So I think it would be fair to say that both are. We never had, thankfully, any of the ACM cladding associated with Grenfell Towers, but nonetheless we do have combustible cladding and building systems in some of our buildings, and we have an accelerated programme to deal with all of that material now. Something at an expense of something like £20 million to make sure we have all of our properties have non-combustible cladding on all of the properties. But I think we tend to steer clear away from high rise for a range of reasons, not just because of people not necessarily wanting to live them, not fitting in the geography, but actually because of the management lessons learned on the back of Grenfell Towers.
And that also comes in terms of affordability as well, because obviously when you're managing blocks of flats with all the latest fire regulations, actually the additional inspection programme means that you can have increased service charge costs, which can again impact on affordability.
Any more questions here for the moment? Councillor Kimber.
Thank you very much. It would be great if we could build affordable homes in our villages as well as our larger towns. I just want to know if you've got any plans to do this. Is there anything we can do to support you? Perhaps speak to landowners to find sites.
Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, of our 6,000,
I'll get there eventually. Of our 6,000 homes planned over the next 4 to 5 years, probably the vast majority will be in rural areas. And we do have plans to build so that the 115 affordable homes over the next 4 years, there will be, I mean, predominantly they're in Tavistock, but I think there's one village location. And the reality is we'd love to do more. You know, we have the financial means to do more. But I think, it is about sitting down, and we are having some very constructive discussions with Izzy and Chris around what does partnership working look like. And, people say quite time and time again, it's about needing grants or it's about needing public subsidy. The answer is no. It actually, finance tends not to be a barrier. The barrier tends to be land and working with local communities to see the importance of affordable homes for the next generation so that the village can continue to thrive, and actually starting to look at policies around both new settlements and expanding existing settlements and recognising that they're contentious issues, but if managed sensitively can deliver more affordable homes, but also continuing to promote exception sites as well. I mean, there's lots of ways we can do this now, but I think it requires clear civic leadership around seeing affordable homes as a priority and engaging with those and communities to promote the need for affordable homes, recognising that it can be quite contentious, but also trying to make the case that actually the people we're housing are people who are genuinely, the vast majority of our people we're housing are of working age, but just cannot afford to get on the housing ladder. It's about creating opportunity for people to live in an area they wish to live and not being priced out of the market.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
When you talk about updating properties, does that include making them more energy efficient?
Yes, it does. So when we talk about updating properties, it includes a number of things. It includes our planned programme and cyclical programmes, which includes putting in new kitchens and new bathrooms, but it also includes all of our energy efficiency work. And as I mentioned, that's a fabric first approach. So that includes making sure we've got the right windows in there with the appropriate levels of, insulation. We've got the right roof on there. We've got the right external fabric in the building. And then we've got the right heating solutions, either through air source, ground source heat pumps, or through a very highly efficient gas boiler, and then supplementing that where it's feasible through the use of photovoltaics.
I think just to summarise, by 2028, all of our homes in West Devon will be at least EPC rated C or above. And as Suzanne mentioned in the presentation, we've already allotted £400 million within our business plan to be net zero carbon by 2050. Once we've achieved EPC C across our homes by 2028, then we'll be looking towards accelerating that spend to get to net zero as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. Part of my question follows on from Councillor Moyes, so I'll ask it. Councillor Moyes and I we sat in West Devon Homes together for about 9 years on the board, and her and I know that Princetown has a lot of oil and coal heating in their homes. So is that some of what you were referring to? Because there is no gas. So is that what you were referring to in some of the items you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we need to do is to find any energy efficient, affordable solutions for our customers for heating for the future. So the likely solutions are solutions around air source or ground source, and likely to be supplemented by photovoltaics on the roofs. But what we're doing at the moment is we have this year, you may have read that we were successful in the first round of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. So we've got grants through that. We've also been working through the local authority LAD scheme to undertake a number of pilots of different house types across our stock. We're using those pilots to actually inform what are the appropriate retrofit solutions for our stock, and to identify both what's appropriate, what's the cost, what are the cost solutions of that, and what are the cost in use solutions of that, and what are the customer perceptions of that, and we'll then use that information to inform our programme going forward.
I think one of the challenges we have nationally is we don't have a joined up approach to getting to net zero as a strategy. And I think that so we can get to EPCC and we can start to put money set aside to net zero, but most net zero solutions require electricity. And one of the challenges is how do we make sure that we've got electricity generated which is affordable to customers. So at the moment, gas, even though it's more expensive, is still significantly cheaper than electricity. So moving from gas, where we have it in ready supply, goes off the grid, we move to electricity through air source or ground source, and that potentially will be more expensive for our customers. So it's the right thing environmentally to do, but it is not without its challenge. So as Suzanne said, one of the reasons why we're doing multiple pilots is to really understand the new technologies in the marketplace so that we can actually apply those technologies to different locations where there's gas or where there isn't gas, and what the fabric of existing homes are like. So we can not only get to a carbon solution, but we can get to an affordable warmth solution as well.
Councillor Turnbull.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of shared ownership, sort of part equity properties. In terms of what's been going on in the housing market the last couple of years, have you seen an upturn in owners laddering and buying further equity in their properties? Have you seen an uptick?
We have. So I would estimate this year we'll probably build about 400 shared ownership homes or thereabouts. I think we built about 250 last year. So everything we are currently building is primarily being sold off plan for shared ownership. It's a very attractive product. But we have what's called staircasing, where people are buying further tranches of their home. And we had significantly more staircases last year than we budgeted to. And in some ways, it's kind of counterintuitive because it's a rising housing market at the moment. But I think people recognise that in a rising market, they actually want to buy more tranches. So we, I think we exceeded our budget by about £5 or £6 million of net receipts last year on staircasing receipts. And that money goes back into the business to help capital fund more affordable homes, whether that be shared ownership or social rent.
And to promote that, we recognised that whilst mortgage rates were low, it was a good opportunity for people to staircase. So in order to promote that, we gave a cashback option and actually froze and gave no admin fee in terms of encouraging people to staircase, and that had a really good impact, with customers, and we're continuing that offer at the moment. Because we recognise whilst there's a low mortgage rate, it's a good opportunity for people to staircase through if they can secure a good fixed rate mortgage.
I just ask us to follow on from that. With some of the staircasing and purchasing more percentage of their home, was some of it down to COVID because they haven't been on holiday, they haven't done X, Y, Z, so actually there was some money in the bank and the best place to put it was within their home?
All of the above. I think what we found was we've seen two things. One, an acceleration of staircasing, and I suspected you're absolutely right. People have not been able to go on holiday. They've not had they've had disposable income, and have therefore used it to buy more equity in their home. But we've actually seen on our first tranche sales on new homes a higher proportion of the initial tranche. Normally it's about 39%. It's gone up to about 42, 43%. So I suspect, again, that's part of people probably saving through what's been quite a challenging 18 months to 2 years. Whether that continues is obviously we'll only have to wait and see.
Councillor Hayworth, please.
Thank you. I wonder if you could just talk about how you allocate homes and how you try and ensure that it is local people and local need that's met as a priority.
So as I mentioned as part of the presentation, all of our allocations are done through the Devon Home Choice system. So everybody has to be registered through Devon Home Choice. We don't do allocations off book or anything like that. In terms of allocations to local people, a number of our, so Devon Home Choice itself will have different criteria at different times, depending on the net inflow or outflow from different local authorities. And we will always apply those rules. Additionally, homes will have specific criteria if there are new build homes around section 106, where they will be set rules in terms of a cascade around which those homes must be allocated. So, for example, we mentioned about building homes in very rural areas or villages. Generally, there will be a section 106 associated with that will require the first letting of that home and all subsequent lettings of that home to be first offered to people who have what is called a local connection with the parish. And then it will be, if it can't be allocated that way, a local connection with the next parish, i.e. an adjoining parish. Then it generally moves out to the West Devon area, and then it would go out to the whole of Devon. So we apply both the Devon Home Choice rules, and we also apply any specific section 106 rules that are written into individual properties. Just occasionally, and I can't think of any specific ones in West Devon, but I can in South Hams, interestingly, there are very specific requirements in some covenants for some homes in terms of how we can allocate them, and we'll always apply those very specific rules as well.
Thank you. And just another issue, dogs, animals in the properties, how is that handled?
Just the same as we allow people to have dogs in properties and their homes. We think, having a pet is something that is valuable, and we would, people like to do. I've got a dog in my home, and I wouldn't want to be preventing other people from being able to have that value. Obviously, we encourage people, to have responsible pet ownership, and we would actively do that. Where people are not looking after their dogs effectively, we'll work both closely with both any local authority dog wardens. In some local authorities, they have that service, and the RSPCA to try and work with those customers to do that. And as a last resort, we will look at other legal remedies if people aren't exhibiting responsible pet ownership, albeit it is very difficult to use legal remedies around pet ownership, to be honest.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Right. We were straying a little bit there, Councillor Hayworth, into operational. Councillor Kemp, is yours operational or is it strategic?
It's probably operational, so.
Okay. Councillor Mott, I'm really sorry we've kept you waiting, but I've gone through the room first for ONS members, but welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and I don't mind waiting because it's been enjoyable listening to the various questions, and thank you to Live West for a very comprehensive presentation. It's great to see the level of investment that's going to be made. A couple of questions, if I may, please. As members, we've been made aware of properties that have been sold by yourselves. Sometimes these are in isolated rural areas where it's unlikely that those properties are likely to be replaced nearby. Are you able to give us a number of the properties sold, please? And if there's any way that we can support the reinstatement of properties within those areas. And also, I'm very conscious, you speak of heat source pumps, etc. I appreciate that they are much more environmentally acceptable these days. However, they are expensive to run, and in some cases not the most suitable method of heating for a lot of properties, particularly in places like Princetown, which is one example that you gave. How can you assure us, please, that the residents will be able to afford the cost of the heat source pumps, given the cost of them to run, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll pick this up. So you may recall from the presentation, I gave some statistics around homes sold in West Devon. So in 2021-22, 8 homes were sold by Live West. These were homes that were either from a condition or investment perspective in need of a disproportionate amount of investment. We are currently planning to dispose of about 6 homes this financial year, and we don't see that changing significantly. So they are relatively small numbers, but you're absolutely right that in a number of instances, they can be rural and quite isolated, where the challenge is how do you replace? And I think this comes back to the point that was raised earlier on around working collaboratively to recognise that we as an organisation have certain challenges. If there's a property that needs 40, 50, 60,000 pounds worth of investment, and by and large, it makes more commercial sense for us to dispose of that home and use that investment to build more affordable homes. Where that creates a challenge in a locality, this is where I think that we need to collaborate far greater than we're currently doing around looking at exception sites, looking at the general need of affordable homes in that rural area, and actually work collaboratively to engage with the local community to identify opportunities to build the homes that are needed. I think when there's a shortage of homes, it's easy to identify the odd home sold, which people believe could be housed, a family could be housed in. But I think nonetheless, I think the wider point is about stepping back and strategically identifying by location the homes needed and working together to actually identify ideally land, but hopefully landowners who empathise with the need of affordable homes and prepared to work with us to help deliver those homes that are needed. In terms of the second question about heat pumps, again, Suzanne mentioned in the presentation that we have a number of homes, over 500 homes in West Devon that are EPC D or below. We need to invest at scale. Obviously, in a number of areas, gas isn't available, so it does present a challenge. Solid fuel is obviously not a long-term solution either, nor indeed is oil. So we are into new technologies, ground source, air source, photovoltaics. We absolutely recognise that there is potentially an affordability challenge here, and I think if I could urge you to do anything, it is really to lobby government around the cost of electricity and looking at renewables longer term, because fundamentally we need to find a cost-efficient electrical solution that will help us as a nation migrate from fossil fuels to non-carbon solutions to 2050. Where one of the reasons why we're doing the pilots we're doing, as Suzanne mentioned, is to really understand in different locations and in different property types what the cost in use is, so we can look at different technology solutions for different circumstances before just ploughing ahead. But I think it would be fair to say that we are going to have to work closely with residents, not only to help them understand how new technologies work, but also about what the potential cost implications could be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. You asked two of my questions there. That saves me. Councillor Crozier, please.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a gentleman in this area who is a bit of a boffin, and he's working on zero energy solutions. You still have electricity supply, but with a lot of voltaic electricity generation and hot water generation roof and storage mechanism. He's working on the sort of system that could become universal. If you're interested, we can put you in touch.
Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you. My question is slightly in a different direction, because I'm interested in not just the environmental impact of a property, but also the way that it can network with the local community. Do you have a strategy for building a community alongside building your properties?
So I mentioned earlier, and I think Councillor Sellis mentioned about one of our community connectors. So across the whole of our stock in each area, we have a number of community connectors. They work on very specific neighbourhoods, and we determine those neighbourhoods in two ways. One of the ways we determine those neighbourhoods are neighbourhoods that could do with you know, some specific investment, social investment, if we like to call it. One of the other areas that those community connectors work is where we're establishing new communities. So where we're building new homes, because we recognise actually that even before those new homes are built, particularly if you're building them on an edge of village location, it's really important to get community buy-in to that development. So one of the things we do is through our community connectors is work in those areas, getting buy-in to those new developments, and then actually helping establish that new community once those homes become occupied.
Thank you. So what kind of range of facilities are you expecting to be supplying alongside your new homes?
So in terms of facilities, obviously, in terms of the environment facilities, we looked very specifically at green space and leisure space. And I think that has become something that is, everybody has recognised the importance of that outside environment, that leisure space, particularly post-pandemic. We obviously also look at play space is one of the other key areas we look at. And then depending on the requirements of any Section 106, or, you know, we'll look at other community space as and when that is required or written in specific planning guidance. That often comes out through the planning expectations of particular sites.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniels, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the types of building you're planning to be putting up, because we know it's perfectly possible to build completely energy self-sufficient homes, which obviously are much less expensive for the tenants. And I'm wondering whether you're considering alternatives such as modular housing, which may not have such a large price increase as the traditional stuff. And also, what are you also considering the carbon cost of the actual build itself? Thank you.
Sorry about that. So, Councillor Daniels, I'll pick that up if I may. So you mentioned modular housing and you mentioned energy efficiency. In the presentation we gave, Suzanne talked about our new build homes. So of the 6,000 homes we are going to build, we're aiming for at least half of them or thereabouts to be built on land that Live West has secured. Where we're in control of the land, we're also in control of the specification. We're aiming for at least a very high EPC-B or an A. So that isn't absolutely net zero, but our approach is very much fabric first. So we want to make the fabric as insulated as possible, so that as and when new technologies come to the market and they're affordable, we can retrofit those quite quickly and cost effectively. We have had some discussion internally about whether we should go to net zero today. And I wouldn't describe that as modular homes, but there are lots of products out there that will give you a zero carbon footprint today. And we could do that. The trade-off would be that we'd be building half the number of homes that we plan to build because of the cost of actually building those homes today. Clearly, over time, as modular housing from a cost perspective becomes more cost efficient, then that may change. But I'm afraid to say that we as a social landlord recognise there's an absolute housing crisis, and so there is a trade-off between volume and net zero carbon, and we want our homes to be as efficient as possible. So we've gone for a very high energy rating B or A, and the trade-off for the Southwest is we can then build 6,000 affordable homes, which if we don't build, I don't believe would be built. I think there is a challenge for those homes coming through 106 because building standards aren't due to change for spec developers until 2025. So again, anything you can do to lobby central government around accelerating that and encouraging developers to go to move from, well, EPC C or very low Bs are still being built quite commonly, but actually we need to use the planning system where we can to encourage developers to build as energy efficiently as possible now, rather than waiting for the legislation to force all developers to build to that standard.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Finally, Councillor Sellis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on actually from Councillor Daniels, have you, your team presumably is looking at the most energy efficient sources and materials?
Can you talk into your microphone, please?
Sorry, Chairman. Clearly your team looks at energy efficiency and everything. Have you actually ever considered wool, given that the Southwest is a big producer and the UK is a big producer of wool? I'm sorry if this is an odd question, but it is something that I have read about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No, we haven't considered wool, and at least I'm not aware we have. We have considered lots of other modules. The challenge is using building materials that can be scaled up, significantly. So we are looking. Councillor Daniels mentioned modular systems. We have a number of modular systems that we build today from timber frame and different types of timber frame through to a small number of homes being built in factory and craned to site. Clearly, the latter solution brings with it some inherent challenges in the Southwest. You can take an Arctic down the M5 and then you stop. So we recognise that we have a modular scheme which is being factory built in Taunton at the moment and in Bridgewater. But actually trying to do that same scheme in somewhere like Truro or St Ives or St Just, it is just impossible. So we are moving towards 25% of all our new homes being modular built, but that will be effectively panelised construction, panels built in factories and then brought to site and then the home constructed on site. It should reduce construction period, but it's actually more expensive. We are still working through the numbers, but we think it could be anything from £9,000 to £15,000 per home more, which doesn't sound a lot, but when you're planning to build 6,000 homes, it soon adds up. So we are, this is an era of new technology, and clearly the more people that build homes and are prepared to embrace this new technology, one would hope the cheaper the product will become long term. And we think Live West has a real part to play in that, but certainly we would encourage more associations to build at scale, and indeed obviously encourage developers to build to a higher standard, ideally through panelised or modular build.
I'm just going to ask one last question. As a company, how do you view photovoltaics? Because I'm not sure if it was Plymouth City Council or Plymouth Community Homes, not sure who did it, but it was a complete across the board. They put photovoltaics on their properties, and there's many social housing providers that do that. So what is the view? Because there's not many in West Devon.
So Suzanne touched on this earlier on, but our retrofit agenda, integral to that will be photovoltaics, and on our new build standards, the ones that we can control rather than the 106 homes, they will all have photovoltaics as well.
So I know about the Plymouth Community Home System because I was working at Plymouth when actually we installed that. So Plymouth were able to install photovoltaics across their homes, actually using the feed-in tariff at the time. So what they were able to do was to fund photovoltaics, recovering the funding for that through the feed-in tariff for the next 15 years. So obviously that solution isn't available now. Obviously, though, we anticipate the cost of photovoltaics has already dropped substantially, and as more and more photovoltaics are installed on, as we're all organisations are beginning to retrofit those homes, the cost will drop down further. So we do actively look to install photovoltaics, and it will very essentially be part of our net zero solution. We are finding, and we are doing some photovoltaics now as part of our pilot work that we are doing.
Finally, just to thank you both for your time this afternoon and for answering members' questions and the information that you have given us as to the way that Devon and Cornwall No, you're not Devon and Cornwall anymore, are you? No.
That's heresy.
I'm really sorry. As to the way you're going forward and everything like that, we wish you well with it. As we all know, sourcing for building supplies for homes and getting the builders, etc., is extremely difficult at the moment. So I really wish you luck that you are able to deliver what you have planned to do. And knowing how a planned maintenance system works, catching up with that is going to be quite good fun, I think. Kitchens and bathrooms and roofs, etc. So, but thank you all on behalf of all of us for what you do for our residents in West Devon and for the working relationship you have, particularly with Alex and Isabel. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for coming along.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Councillor Radcliffe, you haven't got time for chit chat. It's you now. No, I'm looking at that clock. Councillor Kimbers set me a target. So, right, so where are we? So item 8 is the thematic update, and this ONS meeting, it's housing, which falls to our portfolio holder, Councillor Barry Radcliffe, please.
Thank you, Chair. And may I bring members the report, or bring members' attention to the report, A Plan for West Devon, Thematic Update and Improving Homes. And this can be found on pages 7 to 16 of this agenda. The Council adopted the Plan for West Devon in September 2021, alongside detailed thematic delivery plans for each priority area. This report provides a thematic update on improving homes strands of the Plan for West Devon. I would like the author of the report, Isabel Blake, to take members through this document, and we will be pleased to take questions afterwards. Thank you, Chair.
Mrs. Blake, are you ready?
As I ever am. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present to members a thematic update on improving homes, invite any questions, as Councillor Radcliffe has already stated. As members will see, the Council is on track in 5 of the 6 priorities, which include the numbers of affordable housing delivered in the borough. In 21-22, this was 36, and a further 72 are already in the pipeline for next year, actually this year. We've also included information on our work to improve energy efficiencies in homes, and I'm pleased to be able to inform you that the redevelopment of Spring Hill commenced invitation for tender yesterday. Where we are slightly behind is around issuing some guidance and support for landlords of houses in multiple occupation. This was delayed because of the formation of the new 5-year homeless strategy and office time taken up by that, which was considered at the last hub and is recommended for adoption at the next full council meeting. Members will note the anticipated progress of the next 6 months and any key risks identified. West Devon has declared a housing crisis, which now forms part of the Housing Strategy Action Plan and is fundamental to the new homeless strategy. And members are very clear with their expectations of that, and that will feed into the work that you will see within this thematic update in the future. Happy to. We also had some questions from the towns and parishes that so the chair, you, Mandy, requested some questions from the chair. We've actually had in excess of 20 questions, which is great, and we'd like to provide written rather than here written responses to all of those as part of the minutes.
As part of the minutes, I was going to say, is there any generics that kept coming up?
Can concerns around what we might be able to do. Lots of things that are already in track around that form part of the housing crisis, that we're able to give a bit more information on, the changes to the business rate loophole. And I'm just looking at them here. Who we might work with, whether we'll work with almshouses, some information about how many people have registered for downsizing. So yeah, really good questions and a huge variety, so we can provide written answers to those.
If any of those parishes are listening into the meeting, thank you very much for taking the time and the trouble and to discussing it within your parishes, this housing issue. As Mrs. Blake has already alluded, we will send out written responses. But if you think you know of people with some land that could be put forward, particularly in smaller parishes and things where Mrs. Rehart will know if there's a need or whatever for properties, we would really genuinely like to hear from you, because we can't move on with the housing crisis unless we know how everybody can pitch in and help with this situation. May I just ask members, does anybody have any questions on the report that's in front of you this afternoon, please? Councillor Moyes.
Yes, I was wondering if there's any progress on providing the housing in Brentore that's been talked about for years now.
That's no problem. This one is working, this was a struggle with. We just about concluded the housing needs survey, which was undertaken just before Christmas, just after Christmas. So I'm hoping that the results are going to have been checked through, looked at properly, and we'll be able to give those back to the parish council within the next 2 weeks maximum. So hopefully that will be on track. We can get next steps sorted then.
From that, can you give update very briefly, Lamerton and where was the other one? Brentore. Was it Mary Taylor? Lamerton's closed, thank you. Can't think where the other one was now. That was it. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Alex. Do members have any other questions? No? Thank you very much for getting those details of the numbers through in the last week from when I asked you at Hub for this meeting. Thank you for doing that, Alex. It's much appreciated. You may say whatever you like, Mr. Brooke.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to bring to the attention of ONS that, clearly there's significant ambition around housing. We've had a fantastic presentation by Live West today, which I found really interesting. We are working to think about the long-term picture and that collaboration. And shortly, members of the council will have the opportunity to consider a report from Izzy that we discussed at SLT around aligning resources in the housing team to that ambition. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that it'll be coming up, and I think that's going to be an area of debate and an opportunity for us to do more in this space if that is what members would like to see us do. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Live West clearly struggle with the planning process. And I just wonder whether there is something that we as a council or Overview and Scrutiny Committee could look at, and how we can actually make it easier, because it's all well and good declaring this emergency. I bet all the councillors are asked for help with housing and everything like that, and it's actually can be very distressing as a councillor, let alone as somebody who's desperately seeking accommodation. So how do we go about this? How, lobbying government or whatever? I throw that question open.
With your permission, Chairman. Well, so firstly, I think their main thrust is around strategic planning rather than on a case-by-case basis. So they're basically saying we need to have control of land before it's allocated, because at the point it's allocated, and I'm picking it for you, at the point it's allocated, it's worth a fortune. Before it's allocated, it's a field. So do the maths. On a case-by-case basis, though, I completely agree. And part of the proposals that we're bringing through Hub and then onto Council address that exact point, where we consider there is a role for an affordable housing planning officer, a sort of like a turbocharged pre-app service where it's appropriate. So that's something that we will set a bit more flesh on the bones for you all to consider. Obviously, there's a resource cost, but I think we believe there will be delivery benefits. So it's a very valid point.
Thank you. Well, if there are costs, certainly we can offset those. If we produce a plan, we can think strategically and put those costs, those added costs, into the process, can we? Into the big mixed melting pot.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's a starting cost. So we've got ways of funding it, and we will bring a funded proposition to Hub first and onto Council. So.
Just going on from there, my question was going to be, Live West say they're going to build their properties on an EPC A/B. Is there any way under planning that we can say to other developers, well, we expect that standard as a norm? I know I've had this conversation multiple times over the years, but photovoltaics should be built on every property that is being built now. You know, we should be looking to the best systems possible. We don't seem to have a lot of joy in this council at actually getting anything out of anybody almost for Section 106 for insisting on those sort of standards. They all seem to get in with us before things are more easily applied. You know, they just get in a bit sooner before the laws sort of slightly change or whatever. And it is a concern, because if we can get as many properties built that are to a good, decent standard, we used to talk about a decent home standard and lifetime homes. We don't even hear about lifetime homes, with the doors being made wider, and I'm sure Councillor Blackman knows more about it than me, but you know, doors wider, downstairs facilities more, and things like that, so you can live in that home for a lifetime. Is there any way that the council can just insist a little bit more on what we get?
Permission just to...
Never. Way! Watch this.
With reference to disabled access and having new to all new houses now to comply with Part 10, which is disabled access, or level access downstairs for these that sort of certain size widths of doors. So that's already in place. They do. They have to. I inspect them mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, can you say any more?
Oh, sorry, I just can't his hands up. But yeah, I think the main thrust of the answer to your question is yes, we can, and yes, we are, and it's called Dev 32 Plus. And Councillor Mott, who is our link with the Joint Local Plan,
Is Caroline wanting to speak?
No, but I'm just checking if her hands up. So again, so yes, absolutely, we recognise this area. It's something that we really want to do as much as we can to improve, and that new policy has gone out for public consultation. That public consultation ended last week, and it will come in time through to Hub and Council, and that policy will do everything, or a lot of what you set out.
Yeah, brilliant. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, before if we were to say as a council that all new development had to have photovoltaic equipment and what have you, I would actually want to scrutinise, or get somebody to scrutinise the integrity of resourcing the materials that actually produce these photovoltaic so-called green, clean energy. Because I believe it, you know, when you actually sourcing the materials, the raw materials, they are not without impacting detrimentally the environment. So it's all well and good for the United Kingdom to have photovoltaics all over, but at the cost of what other countries? So I would not feel happy voting in favour of a blanket saying you've got to have these solar panels, etc. Because I I've yet to, I need to pull my finger out and do it. It's actually scrutinise the integrity of sourcing the materials.
On that note, I would like to thank you all for attending this meeting. To those of you that have been here all year, thank you very much again as we come to the end of the municipal year. And just to remind everyone, whatever goes on within the council and outside, which is to the council or internally about the council, you can bring it to overview and scrutiny. If that is something you want looked at that just maybe, you know, catches your attention and you think, are we delivering on this in the best way possible? Are, you know, the officers, have they got the equipment, tools, whatever to be delivering on what we ask for? Please bring it to overview and scrutiny. Overview and scrutiny programme, which is next item on this agenda, it's about us filling it. It's not about the officers just bringing round their reports that they have to bring. It is about us as members being able to fill it, to have a task and finish group, to really look at something, as I think Mr. Molyneux normally says, to take a deep dive, as he always calls it, and look at things and really scrutinise it. We haven't, in the last 2 years, had any task and finish groups because of COVID. So it would be really good in the 4th year of this council to be able to get some task and finish groups back up and working, and maybe taking Councillor Sellis's point, looking into other photovoltaics, not just them, other things that we would like to improve our properties by, and members who are really interested in it, you know, can come on board into that task and finish group. And some people have professional skills that they can bring to those groups and say, well, yeah, that's a load of rubbish. This is why it's a load of rubbish, but this is a really good idea. And, you know, that is what the job of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is to really look and analyse things and to do that. So thank you. Sorry, the next meeting, before Mrs. Shum tells me off, is on the 21st of June. There's nothing much on the work programme yet because of the change in May to what may be going on. So the items there are probably pretty standardised, but as you can see, July, etc. onwards, there is nothing there apart from what is scheduled. So if there's a group like we've seen the CVS today, next time we have the Southwest Mutual Bank, if there's an organisation that you would like to come in to speak to us about what they do, how they support our communities, etc., ask for them to come. Mr. Molyneux, Ms. Young, myself, if it's me, we're all happy to take questions. Claire, I'm going to leave the last word to you.
Thank you very much, Lady Chairman. I was hoping that sometime, and since you're, I am taking your words as you asking for ideas for future meetings. Is there any a possibility of talking about how to enable local communities to have more hold over traffic and traffic calming and policing in an area where, well, my local community doesn't see a policeman really. We have too much, we have growing traffic problems. We have little contact with the Devon County Council because they never have any money. How do we enable our local communities to take hold of this problem? Very much more people in a very small towns with narrow roads that obviously can't be built over. It is a real issue.
Thank you very much. Ask Councillor McGuinness.
Yeah, I've asked Councillor McGuinness. I've asked. There is no funding. Therefore, we need.
Claire, we'll note it and we'll discuss it and we'll come back to you. Okay.
Thank
you. Looking into where?
Well, yeah. Oh, well, it needs to go.
Mr. Brooke. I just had visions of like cob houses everywhere.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a few old cob houses. They sell for a lot of money. Oh, no, Mr. Turnbull. They sell for a lot of money, good old cob. Yeah, Stamford Courtney's riddled with them. From memories of my days in the estate agents. What was that? Why is one burned down? Okay, okay. Right,
I think I'll close the meeting on